I recently met with a couple who wanted to retire 2 years earlier than they had initially planned. So they're 62 years old. They had always envisioned and had planned to retire at age 65. But in today's video, we're going to walk through the impact of retiring at 63 instead of 65 would have on their long-term retirement plan. And by the way, my name is Ryan and I founded Denali Financial Group, and we help people all across the country prepare for and stay retired. And what we're going to do today is we're going to jump into their plan. We call our planning process the Mint for More retirement method. And what this method is it's a planning process, but it doesn't just focus on investment planning. It focuses on what I call the 5 worlds of retirement. So that's your income plan, your investment strategy, your tax strategy, healthcare planning like long-term care, Medicare, health insurance, as well as legacy. So those 5 worlds. And as we jump into this plan today, the ultimate goal is to see, can they retire 2 years earlier? And if they can't, what could be done to allow them to potentially retire sooner than they've planned on at age 65. Let's jump in here and take a look at Jack and Mary's plans. So as I mentioned earlier, they're 62 years old, and they originally have always planned on retiring at 65. And no major health concerns, family longevity has been pretty solid, so we're going to have them living out to age 90 as the life expectancy. So that's kind of the basic facts. Now let's take a look at their net worth. Pretty simple overview here. They each have 401ks. Jack's got 1.2 million in his. Mary has 600,000. They own their home. It's worth about 500,000, and then they like to keep a rainy day fund in the bank account of about $50,000. Income is pretty solid. Jack makes $150,000, Mary makes $76,000, so that's $226,000 in income that if they wanted to retire earlier at 63, like we're going to look at, that's a big chunk of money to not be receiving for 2 years, right? That's $500,000 right there gone. But a lot of times when it comes down to decisions on whether or not someone can retire earlier than expected, it comes down to their expenses, right? And so Jack and Mary, their kids are out of the house. They've actually paid for college. They've paid for a wedding, and they don't have any major expenses coming up other than just their everyday lifestyle and some travel. So right now, they're spending $100,000 a year in their pretty basic living expenses. But they do want to travel. They don't feel like retiring early is worth it if they aren't able to do all the traveling that they want to do. And they don't mean like $20,000 trips every 6 months. They just want to be able, they like going to Cancun. They like going to an all-inclusive resort. They'd love to be able to spend 5, 6, 7,000 a couple times a year on trips like that. And by the way, we're going to keep that 15,000 number, that extra spend for travel. We're just going to keep that in the plan the entire time. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always traveling with that extra 15,000, and that's going to be growing with inflation. But it's just there as an extra buffer for maybe when they're in their late 70s and not traveling as much. But there's other expenses that come up. Maybe it's grandchildren, maybe it's medical expenses, whatever that may be. We just always want to have a buffer built in there when it comes to their expenses. All right, so let's jump in here and look at their overall plan. And the first thing I always like to look at is just their lifetime portfolio value, right? So they've got the 1.8 million in investments in the 401k. They've got the cash reserve, but then they also own that house that's worth 500,000. So that's a really good asset there. But what I always like to look at, and by the way, this is before we've made changes. We have not made a change to show them retiring at 63. We want to look at, this is the original plan that they had planned for, retiring at 65 right there. But obviously, and they knew this, but their plan looks really good if they wait until 65. Like really, really good. If you see they get all the way out to age 90 and they still have $3.2 million left over at the end of this plan. And that's not assuming any crazy investment returns. The returns we're projecting are right in the 5 to 6% range. And so this looked really good, but they were burnt out. They wanted to see what retiring early looked like. So the other thing we always like to see is we run some Monte Carlo simulations, which is really just running analysis on your plan, running simulations to see how often you would have to make adjustments to avoid running out of money. And so what you're seeing here is they have a 95% probability of success, meaning 95% of the time, they're not going to have to make any adjustments based on those simulations. But 5% of the time, they might have to reduce spending. Maybe that travel number goes down, and that could just be dependent on the stock market or higher inflation or whatever that may be, right? So that 95% number is an awesome number, right? We're usually targeting an 80 to 85% number, and I'm usually feeling okay if we're in those 80s. But a lot of times people, just the way we're ingrained, the way we went through school, we like seeing 90 and above because that's an A, right? And so people get really hung up on that. It doesn't have to be in the 90s to be successful, but a lot of times it makes people feel a little better to see it there. So that's the Monte Carlo summary, but now let's look at what changing their retirement age looks like. A couple adjustments. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this toggle that is going to have them retiring at 63, but since they're retiring at 63, they aren't qualifying for Medicare, so they've got to pay extra out of pocket for health insurance, no longer covered by an employer. So I'm also going to add about $24,000 a year in expenses for medical on top of what they were already paying. And so as you see, as I make those adjustments, this plan is pretty severely impacted, right? The gray up here is where they were prior to making this switch when they were working till 65. And now this blue is their new value. Now, just because we see the decrease in their investments doesn't mean this is a bad plan, right? That's expected, right? Their income went away 2 years earlier than expected, and they had really solid income coming in. So while this isn't near as good looking as the first plan, is it necessarily bad? Well, not really. It shows that they would still have $1.3 million at the end of this plan. But we also want to run those scenarios, right? Because that's just kind of a median number if the stock market's kind of performed the way it has historically. But let's take a look at that Monte Carlo simulation, right? You remember last time it was 95%. Now it is obviously sitting there at 75%. So as I said, we really like this number to be 80 and above. So this would be a reason for us to say, well, maybe retiring at 63 isn't the best decision. It's a little more risky and definitely could lead to more stress in retirement if we see some things in the economy go poorly or whatever that may look like, right? So 75% would be a reason to maybe say, okay, well, maybe we don't both retire at 63, but it doesn't mean we both still have to work till 65. So let's say Jack said, you know what, I don't dislike my job that much. I'm not as burnt out as Mary is, and I would love for Mary to be able to retire earlier. She can retire at 63, but what happens if I just work one more year? So let's take a look at how this works, right? We turn this toggle on. We've got Mary retiring at 63. Jack's going to work one more year, retire at 64. Because of this, they don't need to cover health insurance out of pocket off the open market for 2 years. They're only going to need to do it for 1 year because this extra year Jack works, they'll be covered by his employer. So that saves some money, and it also allows them 1 more year of Jack's really good salary of $150,000. So here's what that looks like. And now this is starting to look like a better plan. They've got $2.3 million projected to still be there at the end of this plan, which has them feeling much more comfortable because this could also be there as some long-term care protection, but this is also a scenario where we may look into getting some sort of long-term care type policy just to help them there. But either way, they're feeling more comfortable with this cushion that they have there. But now let's take a look at that simulation, right? So they went from 95% when they both work till 65. If they both go at 63, this drops all the way down to 75%. But if Jack just works 1 more year and Mary retires early, this number is sitting at 86%, which to me is a really good spot to be. It means, sometimes if somebody has a 99 or 100% probability of success, what I'm saying is, well, man, you should be spending more money, which is a great problem to have. But 86 to me is a really solid spot. That means you're maximizing your money. That means you've saved the right amount. You're spending a reasonable amount, but you're also giving yourself enough reassurance to know that most of the time, 86% of those scenarios, those simulations that are ran here, you are going to be more than okay. You are not going to have to worry and not make adjustments to avoid running out of money. So why I like to run analysis like this is because a lot of times people won't check out to see can they retire earlier than expected, or they'll just stop at that first scenario we ran. They'll see, oh, well, retiring at 63 doesn't look as good. Well, let's just work 2 more years like we planned. It doesn't always have to be a yes or no answer. It can be a, well, yes, you can retire early, but maybe not as early as you want, or maybe you both can't retire early. So this is the importance of just running, I call it stress testing your plan. This could be done by retiring earlier. This could be done by upping expenses, but you can always see impacts that are happening on your plan. It just takes actual financial planning. So if you've ever been curious about how this all looks for you and your situation, go down below. You can set up time for a quick introduction call with me, or you can just take our quiz that gives you an idea of the type of planning you may be receiving if you currently have an advisor. And that way you can just see, are you getting the right type of planning? And if you're not, it may be time to explore a relationship with an advisor that does do this holistic 5-world approach to financial planning. So that is it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again soon.